I need everyone to understand that I'm 18, that I know how to turn a camera on and off, and that I know how to tell people when to stop and when to keep going. Those weren't just random words from Piper Rockelle on her 18th birthday. They were a declaration of independence that sent shockwaves through the internet. But what came next has people questioning everything about her sudden transformation and the disturbing pattern that's emerged with child influencers turning 18. Alabama Barker, Sophie Rain, Camila, Piper Rockelle, Bree Hill, and Jamal got exactly 24 hours to cast their vote on whether Piper would drop the link. The same link that's become synonymous with one thing in the influencer world, and it's not a music video. The timing couldn't be more calculated, the messaging couldn't be more clearer, and the internet couldn't be more divided on what's really happening behind the scenes. Quick favor, if this type of deep dive content is your thing, just tap that subscribe button. I promise it's less commitment than whatever Piper's considering dropping. What everyone witnessed wasn't just a birthday celebration. It was the rollout of a carefully orchestrated free brand that has all the hallmarks of something much darker. From professional photo shoots with grown men to sudden family reunions that were previously exposed as fake, Piper's 18th birthday looked less like stepping into adulthood and more like the execution of a business plan that's been years in the making. The second Piper turned 18, the posts started flooding in. But these weren't your typical birthday snapshots with friends and cake. We're talking highly produced, provocative imagery with captions that made people's skin crawl because of the timing. Freshly 18 became a recurring theme, and the uncomfortable truth is that this phrase has become a marketing strategy in the worst possible way. Here's what really sent people over the edge. The photographer behind these shots is a grown man. While there's nothing inherently wrong with professional photography, the combination of the timing, the style, and the messaging had people asking uncomfortable questions. Comments flooded in with concerns like, is nobody else finding it weird a grown man is photographing this? The timing felt too convenient, too planned, too much like someone had been waiting for this exact moment. What made it worse was the possibility that some of these photos could have been taken while Piper was still 17. The professional quality, the multiple outfit changes, the various locations. This wasn't a spontaneous birthday photo shoot. This was content that had been planned, prepared, and produced in advance, just waiting for the legal green light to be posted. Fans started connecting the dots and they didn't like what they saw. Comments poured in, begging Piper not to follow a specific path. Piper, please don't be like the others. Do modeling instead. Other fans were more direct. Piper, you know the Lord doesn't want you to have an OF. The fact that people felt the need to say this publicly shows how obvious the setup appeared to everyone watching. But Piper's rollout wasn't happening in a vacuum. There was a recent precedent that made everyone nervous, and her name is Lil Tay. Just months earlier, Lil Tay had turned 18, and literally 1 minute after midnight, she dropped her OnlyFans link. Not 1 hour, not 1 day, 1 minute. The precision was disturbing, but what came next was even more shocking. Lil Tay made over $1 million in just 3 hours. She wasn't shy about it either, bragging about her success and mocking anyone who questioned her decision. When people asked why she did it, her response was classic Lil Tay. Can I ask you a question? Why your mama make you so ugly? The attitude, the timing, and the massive financial success created a blueprint that other young influencers couldn't ignore. The Lil Tay precedent changed everything. Suddenly, every child influencer approaching 18 had dollar signs in their eyes and a clear path to instant wealth. The pressure from fans, managers, and financial advisors became intense. Why struggle with brand deals and sponsorships when you can make millions overnight with adult content? For years, Piper's content had either completely excluded her father or only mentioned him in the most controlled circumstances. Her mother, Tiffany, had maintained tight control over every aspect of Piper's brand, including her family relationships. So why was her dad suddenly back in the picture right after this controversial 18th birthday rollout? The answer might lie in something Piper revealed that shocked her longtime fans. Remember that emotional "Meeting My Dad" video from when she was 14? The one that went viral for showing this vulnerable moment between a daughter and her absent father? Turns out, the whole thing was completely scripted and fake. Piper admitted that Tiffany had told her to fake the entire emotional reunion for views. "I'm so sorry to break it to you, but that unfortunately was very scripted and fake. Those were real emotions that I had, though, because I've never met my dad, and it was kind of like reenacting what I feel like is going to happen." The revelation was devastating for fans who had invested emotionally in that story. If the first dad reunion was fake and created for content, what does that say about this new reunion? The timing is suspicious. Right after a controversial birthday rollout that had people comparing Piper to Lil Tay, suddenly there's a heartwarming family story to soften the narrative. It wouldn't be the first time Tiffany had used family drama as damage control. Fans noticed the pattern immediately. "Notice how she turned 18 and can finally see her dad" became a common comment. The implication was clear. Tiffany had kept Piper away from her father as a control mechanism, and now that Piper was legally an adult, she couldn't prevent the relationship anymore. But the dad storyline wasn't the only family drama causing confusion. During Piper's recent cruise with the Bop House, fans spotted a woman who looked familiar. Comments started flying. "Is this the aunt?" The woman in question looked like she could be the same aunt who had appeared in the Netflix documentary that exposed the dark side of Piper's operation. If the first dad reunion was fake and created for content, what does that say about this new reunion? The timing is suspicious. Right after a controversial birthday rollout that had people comparing Piper to Lil Tay, suddenly there's a heartwarming family story to soften the narrative. It wouldn't be the first time Tiffany had used family drama as damage control. Fans noticed the pattern immediately. "Notice how she turned 18 and can finally see her dad" became a common comment. The implication was clear. Tiffany had kept Piper away from her father as a control mechanism, and now that Piper was legally an adult, she couldn't prevent the relationship anymore. But the dad storyline wasn't the only family drama causing confusion. During Piper's recent cruise with the Bop House, fans spotted a woman who looked familiar. Comments started flying. "Is this the aunt?" The woman in question looked like she could be the same aunt who had appeared in the Netflix documentary that exposed the dark side of Piper's operation. The confusion was understandable. If Aunt Patience, the woman who had blown the whistle on Tiffany's alleged abusive management style, was suddenly back in Piper's life, that would be huge news. It would suggest that Piper was finally connecting with family members outside of her mother's control. But other fans quickly corrected the speculation. "Y'all, the aunt you're thinking about has a sleeve tat. This ain't that aunt." It was a different relative entirely, which meant the Netflix whistleblower was still estranged from the family. The mix-up highlighted how invested people were in seeing Piper break free from what they perceived as her mother's toxic control. The Netflix aunt, Patience, had revealed some of the most damaging information about Piper's childhood. She exposed that Hunter Hill, who everyone believed was Piper's older brother, was actually her mother's much younger boyfriend. The entire brother narrative had been fabricated for content, with a romantic relationship being disguised as a family dynamic for YouTube videos. Aunt Patience didn't stop there. She detailed how Tiffany controlled every aspect of the children's lives, how their childhoods were sacrificed for constant content creation, and how toxic the environment had become. Her testimony painted a picture of a woman who had turned her daughter's childhood into a 24/7 business operation with no regard for normal development or well-being. So when fans thought they spotted Aunt Patience on the cruise, they got excited because it would have meant Piper was finally surrounding herself with people who had stood up to Tiffany. But it turned out to be wishful thinking. The woman on the cruise was a different relative entirely, and the power dynamics around Piper appeared unchanged. The cruise itself became another point of controversy. Some fans defended the Bop House, saying, "Y'all don't realize the Bop House is safer than her own house." Others pointed out the hypocrisy. Y'all wanted her to join the Bop House and everything, and now that she's hanging out with them, it's a problem? But whether the Bop House was a positive or negative influence missed the larger point. Piper's environment was still being shaped and managed by the people around her. She wasn't making independent choices about her career, her relationships, or her content. She was still operating within systems controlled by others. If you're starting to see the disturbing pattern here, you're not alone. Hit that subscribe button to stay informed about how these stories develop. All roads kept leading back to Tiffany, and for good reason. The lawsuit filed against her by former squad members painted a devastating picture of alleged abuse and exploitation. 11 former members of Piper's friend group had come forward with accusations that went far beyond typical entertainment industry problems. The allegations included claims of verbal, physical, and sexual abuse. Former squad members described an environment where children were subjected to inappropriate treatment, exploitation, and abuse while their childhoods were monetized for content. The lawsuit claimed that Tiffany had created a toxic environment where kids were forced to participate in content that made them uncomfortable for the sake of views and revenue. One of the most disturbing allegations was that Tiffany had allegedly shared inappropriate images of underage squad members with older men. If true, this meant that the same people who had been waiting for these children to turn 18 might have already been consuming inappropriate content of them as minors. The implications were horrifying. These weren't minor complaints about strict management or difficult working conditions. These were serious allegations of criminal behavior that painted Tiffany as someone who had systematically exploited and abused children for financial gain. The lawsuit represented years of alleged misconduct that had been hidden behind the cheerful facade of YouTube family content. The timing of Piper's 18th birthday rollout took on a different meaning in this context. If the allegations were true, then Tiffany had spent years building an audience of people who were inappropriately interested in these children. The professional photos, the suggestive captions, the emphasis on being freshly 18, it all looked like the culmination of a grooming operation that had been years in the making. Even Lil Tay seemed to recognize the connection. Under one of Piper's recent posts, she commented, "What happened to us?" Piper's response was diplomatic. "I was nothing but kind to you. Wish you the best always." But the exchange highlighted the shared experience these young women had of growing up online under questionable management. Both Piper and Lil Tay had been child influencers managed by adults who prioritized profit over well-being. Both had seen their childhoods turned into content. Both had been subjects of inappropriate adult attention from a young age. And both had completely changed their image the moment they turned 18. The pattern was undeniable. The adult entertainment industry had noticed this pattern too. Reports suggested that talent agencies were offering massive advances to young influencers approaching 18, sometimes in the tens of millions of dollars. The message was clear. Your childhood audience is ready to pay premium prices for adult content, and we're ready to help you capitalize on that transition. Lil Tay later revealed that she had received offers ranging from $30 to $40 million in advance from adult entertainment agencies. The numbers were staggering and represented more money than most people would see in multiple lifetimes. For a young person who had grown up with financial instability, these offers would be almost impossible to refuse. The success stories were equally compelling. Lil Tay's $1 million first day on OnlyFans had been widely publicized. Other young influencers were reportedly making similar amounts. The financial pressure was immense, especially for young people who had been supporting their families through their content for years. But the human cost was becoming increasingly clear. These weren't empowered young women making independent business decisions. These were teenagers and young adults who had been groomed from childhood to believe that monetizing their bodies was a natural progression of their careers. They had been conditioned to see themselves as products rather than people. As of now, Piper hasn't followed Lil Tay's path to OnlyFans. Some fans expressed relief. "I want to say I'm proud of her for not dropping a blue page link. I gained some more respect for her for it." but others remained skeptical. Girl, she's been 18 for what, 2 days? How do you know it's not coming? The skepticism was understandable given the pattern that had been established. The professional photos were already taken. The audience was already primed. The financial incentive was clearly there. And if the allegations about Tiffany were true, then the pressure behind the scenes was probably intense. The financial incentives make this progression almost inevitable. Traditional career paths can't compete with the millions of dollars available through adult content creation. Young people who have been supporting their families through influencer work face enormous pressure to continue generating revenue through whatever means necessary. The psychological impact is harder to quantify, but equally concerning. These young people have never experienced normal adolescence or healthy relationships. They've been performing versions of themselves for public consumption since childhood. The transition to adult content represents not just a career change, but a fundamental shift in how they understand their own identity and worth. Piper's story is still being written, but the early chapters are deeply troubling. Her 18th birthday rollout followed a script that prioritized shock value and financial potential over her well-being and dignity. The professional photos, the family drama, the carefully crafted narrative, it all suggested that she was still being managed rather than making independent choices. The fact that people had to publicly beg her not to follow Lil Tay's path shows how obvious the setup appeared to everyone watching. The internet had seen this story before and knew how it typically ended. The only question was whether Piper would follow the script or find the strength to write her own ending. The broader implications extend beyond individual influencers to the platforms and systems that enable this exploitation. YouTube, TikTok, and other social media platforms profit from child content while maintaining plausible deniability about the inappropriate audiences that content attracts. The lack of meaningful protections for child influencers creates an environment where exploitation is not just possible, but profitable. Parents and managers who prioritize revenue over child welfare are enabled by a system that rewards engagement regardless of the human cost. The more controversial the content, the more attention it generates, and the more money everyone makes, except the children at the center of it all. The solution requires acknowledging that child influencing is a form of child labor that needs regulation and protection. Young people who grow up performing for public consumption need support transitioning to healthy adult relationships and careers. The financial incentives that drive exploitation need to be addressed through platform policies and legal frameworks. But until those systemic changes happen, individual stories like Piper's will continue to play out in public. Young people will continue to be groomed for exploitation under the guise of career opportunity. The transition from child content to adult content will continue to be presented as empowerment when it's actually the culmination of years of conditioning and abuse. Piper Rockelle turned 18, but the celebration felt more like a countdown to something darker. The professional photos, the family drama, the carefully managed narrative, it all pointed to a young woman who was still being controlled rather than finding freedom. Whether she'll break free from that control or become another cautionary tale remains to be seen. That's where we stand with Piper's story. Unfinished and honestly pretty concerning. If deep dives like this are your thing, subscribing helps me keep investigating these stories that mainstream media won't touch. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. The pattern is clear, the warning signs are obvious, and the stakes couldn't be higher. Piper Rockelle's 18th birthday wasn't just a coming-of-age celebration, it was a case study in how child influencers are systematically prepared for adult exploitation. Whether she'll escape that fate or become another victim of the industry that created her is a question that millions of people are watching unfold in real time. What happened to the little girl who just wanted to make videos with her friends? She grew up in an industry that taught her that her childhood, her relationships, and ultimately her body were products to be sold to the highest bidder. That's the real tragedy of Piper Rockelle's story, and it's a tragedy that's being repeated across the internet every single day.